Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, he serves as the president of the LGBT Foundation, and he lives with his partner of 21 years, Juan, in San Francisco. So, Christof, you have such a rich background, and I'm really excited just to dig into all of the different things that you're working on. For our listeners, can you tell us just a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Absolutely. So as you have mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO at Hornet. As a software entrepreneur, I was always intrigued how technology can help improve people's lives and solve problems. But as a gay man, I was frustrated, what I was seeing was on offer in terms of how technology was helping us to form meaningful connection. I'm talking mostly about social apps. That triggered or initiated the Hornet project, which initially was really a fun and side project. And only in late 2016, we started to run this and fund this as a sort of a built business, which today has 80 people on staff. For me, how we are different is very simple. The mission and the problem we were trying to solve, that an app should allow gay men to connect in a meaningful way, which is more than a casual dating. So we wove, for instance, content into the app. Content that could be centered around advocacy or entertainment or sports or health or travel. And this allows people to identify and connect over common and shared interests. And that, I think, is a new thing and redefines the whole proposition of a gay digital home that we are providing to our community. And we're very excited with the progress we have made. And this is something that I'm more passionate than all of my other startups I did before. And I would say that's the third one in sequence.
What you're doing is incredible, and thank you for just building more of an online community. We had friends of the show, Andy Kramer and Al Farmer, several episodes back, and they were the founders of gay.com, and I think it had a couple of other iterations. And it was really fascinating to hear their take on why they created it, and it was really to kind of using technology to bust LGBT people, gay men, in particular, out of feeling isolated in communities all around the globe. And that really revolutionized how LGBT people connected. And I think it's really interesting what you're doing and taking that kind of concept and bringing it to web application development. I liked what you were saying about how you are different from other applications like Grindr or Scruff. Would you consider those as kind of competitors in kind of these apps, or are you really kind of distinguished as being in your own kind of universe because of this rich content that you're developing around travel and interests and other things like that?
That's a very good question. And in some ways, yes. I think there's obviously people that use a gay app and understand Hornet is a gay app and would see us through that lens. But I think as a digital home, we have actually, I would say, two other major, if you will, competitors or substitutes, if you will. One are like mainstream social networks such as Facebook and Instagram. And the other, or the third group, is really LGBT media. Those are the three sort of, if you will, edges of a triangle, and I would squarely put Hornet in the middle. Obviously, people do date or maybe even find a casual date on Hornet as well. So that happens. But I believe it's a much richer and a bigger tent that we want to build and a bigger home. I often made the comparison to a gay bar. A gay bar is unlike a gay bathhouse. In a bathhouse, you go in, for a very single purpose. It's probably very effective, but you go out and often you're not particularly, I would say, proud of yourself. Maybe not, or maybe happy, whatever it is. But it's nothing you would, tell all your friends about and post and check in on Facebook. On the flip side, a gay bar is something where many things can happen. You can go and watch a football game. You can meet people you already know or make new friends. It could be the dates. It could be anything. So I see Hornet as really that digital gay bar or the digital home where the community can come together in a safe place. You can be yourself. And you can make meaningful social connections, which have the entire range. And the content piece is really, in many ways, the gate opener for those meaningful interactions. I mentioned that earlier, but obviously that puts us into juxtapose to many of the often, stagnating print and desktop web media outlets. And so we have taken over a lot of the role they were filling like 10 years earlier. And obviously, like many other media companies, they are struggling, if not shutting down. So many of the people we have on staff, editors, used to be, for instance, at Next in New York or at Frontiers in LA, outlets that have shut down due to the overall changes in the media landscape. And we have put them on staff, and they are producing now, in this context, also very important journalism for the LGBT community.
And just for listeners who aren't really familiar with the application itself, so when you're using Hornet, what are some examples where you can find that content that you're talking about? So in the absence of these really important gay newspapers, LGBT newspapers, and magazines and things like that, how do people access that content, and how and is it interactive in a way where then you can meet other people that might be interested in LGBT advocacy or something like that?
That's exactly how it works. So we have those advocates or those editors. They can come from the community or from our staff, or it could be user-generated content that is either published and visible on a feed. So there's a feed in the Hornet app, something that you will not see in the traditional gay dating apps. And you follow people and see what interests they highlight or comment on. So this will be one way for you to discover content through the lens of your social environment. Another one is more the the discovery model, where you can either, and we call it guys, stories, or places. These are the three dimensions where you can either outright discover, people, or you can outright or look and search and follow for stories that have been published. But we also have a whole place listing, because digital and online is one dimension, but we also want people from online to go offline and meet up in a sports event, whether that's the front runners or in a bar, or find a health outlet that's friendly to LGBT. So we also have the offline listing and have a most comprehensive global database of LGBT approved places that we curated, with nearly 5,000 places listed there in 350 major cities in 70 countries. So all these elements are in the app, and some of them are highlighted socially in the feed. Others are more in a browse and search mode. But all of these are put together in the Hornet social media platform that is available for download in the App Store or on the website at hornet.com.
And we will be sure to include that in the show notes. I like the analogy that you gave to that Hornet application being similar to a gay bar, minus, the pressures of showing up at a gay bar, maybe not knowing anyone, having to drink to be in the space and things like that this kind of levels the playing field in a different way, where people can connect around shared interest and maybe not have to show up in a space for whatever reasons that may feel a little intimidating. So I think that's a really unique. Right now in your business, what has you most inspired? What's the thing that's really lighting you up every day when you show up and you do your magic?
Look, this is all about people. I've been, a software entrepreneur, obviously do this as a profession and to make a living. But in the end of the day, nothing is as rewarding as if you see, either users or customers of your app seeing that, getting value out of what you have created. And that is the most rewarding piece, and that gets me started. And obviously, it's also the team itself that is working on this. I think I've never worked with such a purpose and mission-driven team in my life, because for all of us, this is a little bit of an emancipation, that we go and take technology and our professional background to the next level and create something that's meaningful to us personally and to people all around us in often our social circles as well. So, I give you one example, an anecdote here. We often get those notes from people who say they have found Mr. Right, or they found a meaningful connection. Let's say, they found a running group when they visited a different city. But one such story I found particularly moving, and I want to share that with you, Rose, which is a couple in France, which met on Hornet because they followed a story on the voguing scene, something our editorial team is reporting on quite extensively. We believe voguing is a great platform for often underprivileged members of our community to take their destiny in their own hand and create sort of role models from something out of, they were not privileged, they're the least privileged people in many ways, and create something super inspiring. And it's something we're working with quite a lot and also sponsoring that. So we feel that this is a great way for people to take their destiny in their own hand and be empowered. So this couple told me how they got connected, and I was so proud that the support for inclusion and diversity was so appealing to them, and they met over this commonly shared interest, which we were able to surface and amplify with the work we are doing, which range from our editorial work to our even marketing work. But that's doing the right thing. These times when we see a certain reversal against LGBT progress, right? Not only with the election of Donald Trump, but also you've seen, marriage equality is under, sometimes even under attack or reversal, like in Bermuda and other regression. I find this is really what gets me up and what really makes, the difference. Is I'm a white gay man with higher education, and, I'm healthy. I live in San Francisco. I'm extremely privileged. But I see it as my obligation to make sure that with the help of our technology and of the sort of the means to make things happen, we can extend equal rights and full acceptance to all members of the LGBT plus community.
Thank you for everything that you're doing. And I love that you were talking about voguing culture and just really amplifying the importance of voguing culture, especially for people of color who are navigating poverty in particular, and how central that is in building community and doing some education for other members who are using the web application. I think that's super smart. Kind of in alignment with that work and trying to be inclusive in the content that you're putting out for your audience. I'm curious, inside of your business, I imagine you have many people who work for you. You are a serial entrepreneur, so that's nothing new in building businesses. I'm curious, what are ways that you're trying to build a more inclusive workplace so that maybe you are working to hire people who may have been a part of the voguing community, LGBT people of color in general, women, etc. Are there things that you're intentionally doing inside your business that are really thinking about how to expand economic opportunities for some of the most vulnerable folks under the rainbow umbrella?
Yes, and there's a lot of things we're doing. Obviously, the first and square, like you said, point of impact is how and where we hire. And for us, the Hornet platform is I would say a GBT plus platform, so it doesn't include the L. So that is not that inclusive, but this is also because that's a reflection on, how the L and the G broadly community intermingle socially. There's barely an L and G mixed bar as well in San Francisco. So this is a reflection on how communities form. But we have, for that purpose, to go to the next level, created the LGBT Foundation to utilize blockchain to bring in the entire spectrum, all letters of the alphabet and everyone around the globe into one huge mission, in this case, to activate the blockchain technology to generate an inclusive way to extend equal rights and acceptance to all members of the LGBT plus community worldwide. I can go down this and explain this a little more down the road, but this is one big element how we bring the two groups together beyond Hornet. At Hornet itself, we obviously have a very diverse team. We even have straight people. And we obviously make sure that people of color and people also overseas. We have, for instance, staff in Russia and the Ukraine, which are obviously in a very non-permissive countries, can contribute as well. We give people a chance to join the project by joining the Hornet contributor community. So we have 20,000 people from the community that are producing or contributing towards the Hornet project. Anyone can sign up, and here they are initially rewarded with certain perks, but obviously that gives them visibility, and that's, for instance, a great way for us to identify talent and hire from. So all these are ways how we activate the community and lower the barriers to access or entry and create as diverse a workforce, however, which also, amplifies the contribution these people are doing and the initiative they're taking, and ultimately, hopefully, are big contributors to our mission.
You're obviously super intentional about how you're building out your business. So thank you for answering and sharing so many of those different avenues. Really, really basic. If you can maybe do this in a sentence or two and just entertain me in explaining what is blockchain and maybe what's the potential for blockchain in creating more economic opportunities, jobs for LGBT people, because you did mention that and I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yes, so I can't possibly do that in one sentence. But obviously, blockchain is a technology that can be likened to a decentralized public database. So think about you create a spreadsheet that's out in the open and anyone can read it. And what's written in there cannot be modified or tampered with unless the community agrees, which is, of course, driving consensus around what the truth is. And then that establishes truth. So that's the one, try to be in one sentence, an explanation what blockchain is.
Thank you. It's kind of like, I mean, probably not the same, but it sounds somewhat like Wikipedia, maybe?
Yes, so there's a whole open source aspect to it. I think that is exactly right. This is basically that the community and the consensus among contributors establishes some form of truth and validation of what's written up there. On top of that, though, unlike Wikipedia, the blockchain creates then an immutable record. So the truth is then immutable and visible to everyone for all times. It cannot disappear. And that is a very powerful way to establish truth. And that's a platform for us to do many things. And we believe there's a huge opportunity for the LGBT community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for explaining that. I really appreciate that. So one more kind of entrepreneurial question, just centered on your own origin story. So really quickly, have you ever worked for anyone else?
No.
Okay. All right. So maybe take us back to young Christof. You finished up school, whatever that looked like, traditional, non-traditional. What was the motivation for you to become an entrepreneur? And in your bio, you have described yourself as a serial software entrepreneur. So in that moment where you were like, I could either work for someone else and help build their business, or I can work for myself. What was some of the factors that led you down the path of being a serial software entrepreneur?
So I was exposed to computing and programming as a teenager, so I kind of knew the power of computers, and in many ways, the empowerment I got as a very young person to do things that are, at least back in the days, I'm quite seasoned, that weren't accessible to people of my age. In fact, I actually did study architecture. I love architecture and design, so I thought this would be a dream profession. But I did have to make money, and so I need to qualify my statement. I did work while I was studying, so to make my money and pay my bills. And as an architect, I earned something, but then the office where I worked for, they understood I was also literate in computers, and they just paid me much more doing the computing work. So I ended up in computing and providing software solution to architects. I felt like I did need to graduate in architecture just because I started it, which was in many ways a waste of time. In some ways, because the moment I graduated, I said, let me commercialize that software because that seems to be useful. So I said, let's bring this to other people. And at 23, I was able to just get out of the gate and start my own company. And I have to say today, looking back, the only qualification I had as an entrepreneur was my ignorance. I just didn't know what I was getting myself into. Hell.
Right. If you knew what you know now when you started at 23, would you still go down the same path?
In the long run, looking back, yes, I'm smiling over it. If I think about all those moments when you just, basically sitting in there, you hear a lot of no's, you think, can I make payroll? Is that deal gonna close? If I think about all these moments, and especially in my 20s, everything is on the line. Your career, your self-esteem, often your own money and or the money of friends and family. And all this is on the line if you fail. So the pressure was insanely hard. Obviously, I had a good ending. I was able to sell my company in late 99. That was the first one, and I did well. But the way to get there was extremely hard. Would I do it again? Well, in hindsight, yes. But you just got to know it needs a lot of perseverance and grit, and you need to have support from your partner. You need to have a balanced lifestyle. Otherwise, it can run you into the ground.
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to shift gears now and talk more about what brings you to the LGBT rainbow family. As I say, I like talking about the rainbow family. And I first want to start out and explore with you, some of the more challenging times of being LGBT in business. I know that you've worked across, you're now with Hornet Networks, but you identify as a serial software entrepreneur. So I imagine there have been spaces and businesses that you've run where they weren't necessarily centered around LGBT communities. If you can take us back to a time where maybe it was difficult for you to show up 100% authentic as being an out gay man in business. And if something comes to mind, if you could just walk us through what was going on for you at that time and how you might have worked around, maybe coming out or negotiating someone who wasn't super friendly to all of us within the rainbow family. So does something come to mind?
Yeah, so at Hornet, obviously, I'm as out as it gets, and I walked the talk and lived the life. But obviously, the previous two companies, the one I mentioned in Germany, and the first one I started here in Silicon Valley in the 2000s, were regular software companies. They were enterprise software companies, and I was always openly gay. So I did not obfuscate or just not disclose. Mostly, obviously, through the presence of my partner. I think I wouldn't run around in business and say, hey, I'm gay, by the way, or I'm a member of the rainbow family, because that per se is not necessarily related, but I would show up or share that this is my partner. And obviously that made me, openly gay. For me, in many ways, especially since business school here in the US in the Bay Area, being gay became actually a strong networking element and then more a boost to the business. So while there may have been situations where I have not felt that this was or it may have been a headwind, I found it actually a tailwind. For me, networking in the Bay Area, I built my professional network in the US. That has been always actually a tailwind for me. I got immediately closer connected to people, and I was able to talk from a common shared life experience or a challenge and how we overcome it, and that creates bonding. So for me, being a member of the community and openly gay has actually always allowed me to build business faster. I know I have been rejected by a few staff members. I can think of a few. I'm sure there's some investors or customers, but frankly, I don't pay attention. I also know that being authentic as an entrepreneur and in every aspect of your business, that conveys strengths and trust and leadership. So while there may have been costs to it, I think the benefits have outweighed those costs big time. And yes, I may have lost a deal, but I've also won leadership, trust, and authenticity. And I think these are the ones that make you a successful entrepreneur. Maybe not, but that's how I think about it.
So you're one step ahead of me. So I want to explore this a little bit more before we talk about how awesome we are in business. So, so just on, you had mentioned, and this was interesting, and this might be a first for the show, but thinking about staff, you had said there may have been one or two staff that had rejected you in the past. Your spidey senses, you obviously picked up on something. So what were you picking up on? And I like what you said, where you're not dwelling on the bad stuff. I get that. I try to kind of, we have to be resilient and move forward in our lives. But, just so that other listeners can know that they're validated in some of the feelings that they pick up on when they're interacting with people in business, what might have been some of those things that you noticed with that staff person?
I can particularly think of one that I know was a very religious person. So he just had basically a sort of no openness towards my sexual orientation, and I felt it throughout the entire work period, and I always discounted it because I said, look, you may be religious and I accept that, and I would expect you to do the same because it's actually not related to all the work we are doing. But it did get into the way and it did harm the relationship, and ultimately that meant we had to part ways. And it was a very good staff member. So from a business perspective, that was a loss. But at the same time, especially in a sort of knowledge-based economy where you have a lot of teamwork, if there is no like a spirit of shared, values, I don't think you can operate at least in the long run. So I felt it was what we needed to do. I definitely paid a price, but I had to make that decision.
Yeah, I like what you were saying about having this kind of shared values, a shared ethos within business, right? And that making that really important for all staff. And, this is something that we as a nation, I think, are really struggling with in kind of looking at a constitutional crisis where we've got this First Amendment, which is amazing, right? We have the freedom to express ourselves, and we also have the freedom to worship or not worship. And I think that rubs up against each other sometimes, and that's what the Supreme Court is working through right now with the
Yes.
Masterpiece Cake decision. I think that it goes back to, in business, if we can center our team morale on working well together and knowing that we have a shared value, like we are working to achieve this thing, that sometimes that helps bring people with vastly different ideologies together because they believe in that thing, whether it's the organization itself or the project. And I think there's real power in that. And almost like in this country today, because it feels like it is so divided, just to remember that, we agree on freedom or we agree on fairness, and that, we actually have more things in common than we have differences. And I think we're a little lost right now around shared values. And sometimes it's kind of going back to basics. So I just thank you for kind of deconstructing that for me. I love that you were already jumping into LGBT superpowers. So I think you talked a little bit about that, but I want to give you more airtime on that because that is what the show is about. And I'm curious, with your lived experiences of being a gay man, now living in the United States, like what are some of those lived experiences that you believe really allow you to stand out as a business person because you are a part of the LGBT community? You were talking about that tailwind. So please elaborate on that because I love hearing from guests on the LGBT superpowers.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'm an immigrant to the United States. I moved here in 2003. And obviously, I had a pretty gold-plated entry point right in the Bay Area, right into the technology industry. So definitely not a hustling immigrant off a boat, but I did have to establish my credentials here. So when I arrived in the U.S. In 2003, I knew the landlord at my bed and breakfast and the person at admissions at B school. I went through B school, obviously, which is, of course, a huge accelerator. I had to build my network, my credibility, and that is something where being an LGBT member became extremely handy. So my first CFO who believed in me is a lesbian woman, and she helped me navigate a lot of the pitfalls around, setting up business in the US, and she even helped me sign my mortgage papers, right? Who would you trust that with, right? Yeah. And I did. This is just a level of trust and shared experience where you can feel safe. Then it's about early investors and investment. I was back in 2004, still pretty hard to actually raise money after the first internet bust. Got quite a significant amount of angel investors, and some of them were members of the LGBT community. So they just saw a little more and trusted me a little more. So I think it's trust and being part of the community that gives you sort of a safer and more inclusive space. So I was able to leverage it. Maybe I'm seeing it the wrong way, but at least it gave me that comfort. And I think that's already instrumental, because if you have comfort as an entrepreneur, that's something that's in rare supply if you're out there and start your own business. So you get that one piece. The other thing is that you get I may be wrong in that, but I think generally speaking, as an LGBT member of the community, you are often better equipped to navigate different, let's say, cultures, because you're always somewhat exposed to straight culture and you're exposed to, let's say, gay culture, to say it more narrow. This, I think, gives you perspective, and that there's no one right or wrong thing. Then everything depends on the context, right? So how I behave in a straight environment versus how I behave in a gay environment is seen differently and judged differently. So I think that gives you a leg up on empathy, to kind of think from the other person looking at you. And that, I think, makes you a good salesperson and a good negotiator. And I may be overemphasizing this, but this would be the LGBT superpower that I would see is one of the particularly strong suits that often go hand in hand with being a conscious member of the LGBT community.
I think you hit on so many amazing things. So one, I want to say yes to the power of being an immigrant LGBT entrepreneur. I think that's hugely important to just kind of shine a light on. And like you said, coming here to the United States, you knew that you had to instantly build a network and credibility. And I definitely agree with you 100% that as hard as it is to come out and to accept yourself and work with blood family to accept you, if that's kind of your situation, the gift is that you get, for better or worse, there's the LGBT communities, waiting for you, waiting to support you. And you had talked about your first CFO, she's a lesbian, and really just kind of giving you some inside tips on what it's like to run a business in the United States, and just so willing to offer that information because you are a member of the Rainbow family, right? And I like what you're saying about, being a good negotiator. I think often we have to translate our experiences for straight or cisgender people who may not really get like all of the things and dynamics that are a part of being a part of the Rainbow community. And so kind of having to be able to kind of distill the important things of our lives so that other people can understand and connect is super, super valuable and important. And in that, being able to have empathy, because we have experienced at some point, I'm sure, some feeling of being discriminated against or microaggressed. So we're more likely to, have empathy for other people who are enduring some kind of oppression, and just our willingness to maybe be more open-minded or accepting. And that's not always true for everyone within the LGBT community, but I do think that there's something to that in what you're saying. So kind of considering some of the challenges and some of the superpowers, I'm curious what you would want to share with our listeners as an important takeaway to inspire them to be more authentic in their work.
I believe, I'm not sure how to answer this. I mean, authenticity is you, right? So this is who I am, right? So, as I mentioned, I come from Germany, I have a German accent. That's just who I am. And that's fine. Initially, I thought, oh my God, I have an accent. That's really bad. But it's just who I am. I'm gay. That's who I am. And I have these preferences. And that's who I am. I think authenticity is something that is, you define that for yourself. I find it hard to give advice on someone. I can just only give encouragement to really think about what is it that is important to you, right? So what is it that defines you? How do you want to be known for? Or what do you want to be known for? And that is really very much up to you. But I do think it's a powerful tool. It sounds very utilitarian, but it's a great way to make headways as an entrepreneur, because you're not only an entrepreneur, you're a leader. You're supposed to activate resources around you when you basically have nothing. I mean, an entrepreneur is different from an administrator. An administrator is someone who allocates budgets that they're given to them. An entrepreneur starts with just about nothing. You have no customers, no product, no credibility, no money, no staff, right? And then out of this, you have to build a business. So how do you do that? By projecting, the idea and the will. And even the idea goes away. How many businesses end up doing what they said they were doing in the first place? Even the idea is transient. What is there is your will and your authentic, genuine, leadership to get this somewhere done, and people start to believe in you, and it becomes a circular upwards sort of self-fulfilling mechanism, and create assets out of nothing. You're bootstrapping literally. And authenticity, I think, is a key tool and a key, if you will, even prerequisite in that. So I think I cannot give an outright answer how someone becomes authentic. I can just encourage to do it and believe it pays off big time, if not even if it's a prerequisite for good leadership, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, there's so so many amazing takeaways in what you just shared. And I think one of the things that was kind of like lighting up in my brain as you were speaking was this concept that if people listen to Tony Robbins, he often talks about this thing where it's like, you're not having a resources issue, thinking about, I could start this business if I only had like X amount of dollars or whatever. It's an issue of being resourceful. And I like what you're saying about being an entrepreneur is being a leader. And part of that authenticity is trusting yourself and trusting that vision, especially when you're just getting started and you're sharing this concept with people who have never seen what you're doing before, right? So it's not like when I think of like what you had said about an administrator who's been given a budget, it's like, they're doing work and it's kind of evolutionary and they're incrementally making changes in the world. I think of the entrepreneur as revolutionary mind, right? Like the person who changes everything. And that sometimes when you're introducing something that changes everything, other people scratch their heads because they can't wrap their minds around what's this vision that you're working so hard to execute and bring out into the world. So I think what you shared was really beautiful, and I really thank you for that. Just a couple questions on mindset before we go to a sponsorship break. First question is, you are a very accomplished serial software entrepreneur. You're doing incredible work with Hornet Networks. When I look at you, it's, you're an entrepreneur you are buttoned down, you have everything together, right? When you were first getting started, did you, like many of us, have to overcome the feeling of imposter complex, this idea of, or imposter syndrome, whatever, however people describe it, but essentially like the feeling of like, you're not ready, you're 23, you're getting started on this awesome vision of building a business, who are you to do this? Did any of those thoughts pop up for you early on in your entrepreneurial career? And if so, what did you learn from them? Or are you still working to manage around those things?
Yeah, you're definitely always prone to this, and you're probably sometimes guilty, right? You are an imposter. As I mentioned, my only qualification to start a business at 23 was my ignorance. I'm cognizant of that ex post. At the same time, this is also something you got to kind of get your head around, that if you start a business, you will hear a lot of nays, right? And you have to listen to the yays, right? And they come not very frequent, especially initially, when you have little credibility or little proof that this is actually working. So you just got to understand this is part of the process, that many people say, your idea is crazy. And why? Because you're creating a new idea. If it was a no-brainer idea, it would have been done already. So the nays are kind of natural, and you kind of have to have this little bit of somewhat of an arrogance to discount that and just very much focus your mind on the yays, right? And really celebrate those. And yeah, that's in some ways not being entirely truthful, because many people say no to you. But it's also part of it. And later, when it all has kind of tipped and you have that proof, they always told you, I always believed in you. So where were you back in the days, right?
Right. Yep.
So they have the benefit of hindsight. You don't have that. So you just got to somehow hang in there, have a lot of grit and perseverance. I think that is also extremely important to get to a level where you are, have more resources as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, there's something to what you're saying around visualization and just trusting yourself, trusting that vision, maybe, a little naivete, a little arrogance, if that's helpful for you. And I like what you're saying about celebrating your successes. Absolutely. I have a mentor who also says, celebrate the rejection too, because that's information. That's information of, this might not be a client, this might not be the direction to head, but it does kind of course correct you in a way. Just don't dwell on it, right? So one other question in this kind of mindset piece is more about, naturally, you're doing the entrepreneurial thing. You're problem solving every day. That's part of the job. When you get stuck, the first part of the question is it hard for you to ask for help? And regardless of if it's hard or not, who do you turn to? Who are your mentors? Like, where do you get inspiration to kind of work through whatever challenge pops up, during your workday?
Yeah, so I have a wide network of advisors. Sometimes they're investors, sometimes they're coaches. It started off at business school. I was extremely lucky and happy that my professor for entrepreneurship became a coach and actually an investor and board member. And it was no one less than the founder of Veritas Software, Mark Leslie. This is kind of sort of my role model for a good coach, and I try to sometimes, like he did, to young and aspiring entrepreneurs to give back. And I do the same. So just previously to this session, I was meeting a young entrepreneur who was in doubt, and he, I think, wanted to just have some coaching. Coaching, I learned from Mark, is it's not so much of giving advice and say, do this, do that. It's really just often being a sounding board. Obviously, you are kind of giving, kind of trying to frame things in a way that it becomes, actionable or useful, or puts things in perspective, or amplifies the things that are good. But in the end of the day, all the help I'm seeking or the question I'm asked, in many ways, it's a process for me to sort out my own mind. And yes, I get amplifications, but in the end of the day, I have to solve most of these things myself, because I am deeper in the weeds than anyone else. So, who is a person who spends a few hours with you? How can they tell you how to do that product or how to win that customer? They can't. You can. It's in your brain, and a good coach and a good advisor will help you to undig that and sort your thoughts, frame it, maybe give you encouragement. But in the end, the answer is always within you. That's kind of how I think about it. Maybe it's a narrow answer, but in many cases, I think that's how I think about coaching.
I think that's really great advice, and the power of a coach is someone who can help you remember that the wisdom is within inside. Maybe it's just kind of a pep talk or something that just kind of can point you and put up a mirror to say, hey, you've got these answers, you got to trust yourself. And I think that that's really valuable. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to a quick sponsorship break. And when we come back, we're going to jump into our bonus round. Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss. Welcome back, Out Bosses. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Christof just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way that we can stay in touch with Christof after today's conversation. So, Christof, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
Go for it.
All right, so here we go. So finish the sentence for me, if you will. As an out boss, I believe.
We all have superpowers.
Yes, we totally do. And do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business, especially when it gets tough?
Ignore the nays. You hear a lot of them, and listen to the yays.
Yeah, definitely celebrate those yays. And can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
I'm very goal-oriented. I plan my 5-year goals, my yearly goals, my quarterly goals, and my weekly goals. And they're not only financial or career goals, but they're also physical and spiritual and interpersonal goals, because all of them have to be in balance. So this is something that keeps me even keeled and also on track to put priorities right and not drown in tasks and activities.
Yeah, and that reminds me for folks, I think I had mentioned this on previous episodes, but Chris Gilliboo, who is a Portland hometown favorite entrepreneur, he does this kind of like yearly goal setting type thing. And it's kind of awesome if you're into spreadsheets. If you're not, if it overwhelms you, don't worry about it. But I think, Christof, what you're talking about is like he gets down into it and really like beyond the business, like the things that sustain you and keep you going, helping you evaluate like what are your goals, spiritually or for your body, energetically. But it's pretty cool. I'm into that, but I'm more type A, so it helps me stay on top of things. So name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
I try to delegate everything. So the job of a CEO is to make themselves redundant. Don't worry, it won't happen. But that's the way you want to think about it. It's this, as a CEO, my job description is to set the strategy, which is the direction, to hire the right people, give them the resources they need to execute, and get out of the way. So in many ways, delegation to the right people making them all work in the right direction, right as in defined by the business, and giving them the resources. And that's the job of a CEO.
Yes, I love that, and you are living it, and it's something that I think a lot of us are aspiring to. There's still a lot of things that personally I'm still doing, and I can't wait for the day to delegate away and carry forth a vision, like you said. What are you most grateful for, in terms of being a business owner who is also an outboss?
I mentioned earlier when I get that feedback that I have changed someone's life. It could be a small change, it could be a big change. Often that comes years later, not often instant gratification. Could be user of a product or a person I have empowered to do a job they didn't even think about in the first place. I remember one of in my first company, a software engineer, I appointed CTO. He hasn't thought about it. He became CTO pretty much through his entire career. And I'm so proud of him that I saw that and gave him that opportunity. This is just what I'm really grateful for, because that is really, in the end of the day, you've changed someone's life through optimistic view on the world. And that's what I do.
Yeah, there's something about seeing someone else's personal transformation or an organization's transformation, whatever that is. That's the reminder, especially for purpose-driven businesses like yours and mine and other people who tune into the show. That's why we do the work, and that's why we show up every day. And even doing the less glamorous stuff of entrepreneurship, it's kind of keeping those moments in mind. So, yeah, I'm in agreement with you on that. So 2 more questions for you. The first is, can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of out bosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
One thing I would like to highlight is having a good support system, especially from your significant other. It could be also your family or people around you. What the relationship is doesn't really matter in the end of the day. But you will need emotional support, because the going will get tough at some stage, and you want to have support and from your system. So I want to give a shout out to my partner Juan of 21 years, now husband since it's legal.
Yeah, congratulations!
3 years.
Yes, that's awesome.
Because he would be the person who accommodates for my sometimes when I'm in a bad mood and help me to stay functional.
Yeah, that's so important. Thank you for that reminder. And last question for you, Christof. Number one, I want to thank you so much for your time and for inspiring fellow outbosses. Before you go, can you just share one way that we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Sure. I mean, you're always invited to follow me on Twitter. My handle is Christof W, ChristofW. Or you can learn more about Hornet at hornet.com. Very simple. And if you're interested in blockchain and the LGBT Foundation, check out lgbt-token.org. So these are all ways to get in touch with me.
Excellent. Excellent. So outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Christof. Christof, thank you so much for your time. You definitely inspire me, and I hope that your message inspired the audience. For details,
thank you, Rose. That's awesome. Thanks for having me on this show.
Of course. And so for details from today's conversation, please check out the show notes. They're going to be at www.outentrepreneur.com. That is www.outentrepreneur.com. And as a next step, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. That's the best way to get the show out. And definitely be sure to share this episode with a friend or a loved one. And as always, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.